have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I'm very excited tonight to bring you a very different story. It's an appropriate story, the story of people whose lives were affected by the death penalty. It's appropriate tonight because Texas is having another execution watch. And for those who disagree with the death penalty and they're aware, it's very sad. I have two people in the audience that are going to tell their stories, but I want to first introduce some Thurgood Marshall School of Law students. They're 3L, third-year students, and they have started an organization called the Death Penalty Awareness Society. And in the studio, I have Miss Amy Greenbaum, who is the vice president of the Death Penalty Awareness Society at Texas Southern Law School. And I also have Daniel DeLuna. Daniel DeLuna is the ambassador of the Death Penalty Awareness Society and my former law clerk, who I miss, who was there this summer and did a great job. So in the studio, though, we're privileged to have two members of the Journey of Hope, From Violence to Healing. And I met them Monday night at Thurgood Marshall School of Law at a reception, and I pull some of them away from the execution watch to tell their story tonight because, you know, my purpose is to educate you about the criminal justice system, about all sides, to tell the stories that nobody else tells, to give a voice to people who don't have a voice, who don't have a mainstream media voice, which is always the same. Hate the crooks, everybody's a crook, everybody's bad, everybody needs to die, hang them high, and we never look at the full story. The news tells you 5-minute news bites, and you think that's the story. And there's a big story behind everything. Obviously, I'm not in favor of the death penalty, although I have worked in this system a long time. But tonight, we have in the studio Miss Terri Steinberg, whose son has been on death row. Terri, thank you so much for coming down from Fairfax, Virginia, and telling us your story.
Thank you for having us.
So try to give us about 10 minutes of your son's journey and your journey as the parent of a son who was on death row.
Well, I work with a group called the Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, and the Journey of Hope is a group organized by a man named Bill Pelkey. He is our president. And this group is led by murder victims' family members, people who oppose the death penalty under all situations. And we are joined by people with family members on death row, members who have loved ones who have been executed, as well as men who have been on death row, who have been able to prove their innocence before they were executed and now walk free with us. And we tell our stories in the hopes that we can open minds and change hearts about the death penalty. I think the problem with the death penalty is that it's about education. People who agree with the death penalty don't realize the collateral damage, and we tell our stories to show the face of the human side of the death penalty. I got involved with this group a few days after my son was sentenced to die. At the age of 20, a young man named Danny had been murdered by another young man named Owen. And when Owen was picked up after he fled the area, he was picked up in California and brought back to Manassas, where the crime was committed. And he was told on the way back in the plane ride that unless he put this on my son, if he blamed my son, he would not face the death penalty himself. And so on May 1st, 2001, my son called me and said, I'm going to turn myself in. They think I had something to do with Danny's death and I have to clear my name. He said, please don't worry, I should be home in a few days. That was 5,277 days ago.
Wow.
We really never dreamed that it would get this way. We really thought that we would be able to bring him home. Right before the trial was to start, I remember that it was Christmas and the trial was going to start in January. And right before, I knew I wouldn't have time to take down the Christmas decorations if I didn't get them down that night. And so as I prepared to take the tree down, my youngest daughter looked up at me, and she was only 4 at the time, and said, "Don't take the tree down, Mama. Justin hasn't gotten his presents yet." We had told her he had been away at school. There was just no way to tell a 4-year-old that the brother that she loved, who watched Disney movies with her and played computer with her in the morning, was in jail, and especially that he was facing a death sentence. This is not something a young child should ever have to hear. My heart goes out tonight, especially for the Escamilla family, because they lose a son, a brother, a family member. And I think that's what people forget about, is that these people are loved by somebody, and we don't need to create more victims by taking the life of another. My son's trial went on for 3 weeks, but the jury only deliberated for 1 hour and came back with a verdict of guilty, and they sentenced him to death. And like I said, that was when I went down to the Supreme Court. There was a group protesting the death penalty. They do a 4-day fast in front of the Supreme Court every year.
What's the name of that group?
It's Abolition Action Committee, and it's joined by the Journey of Hope, sponsored also by the Journey of Hope. And I now have joined them, and every year for 4 days we just make a presence on the front of the Supreme Courts, and we starve together and pass out flyers and talk about the death penalty and help educate people so that hopefully we can make this go away. So in my son's story, in 2005, Owen admitted that he lied in court, admitted that he did it to save his own life, and the Innocence Project at UVA Law School got involved, and they found all kinds of documents that had been withheld. They found evidence that witnesses were put together in order to get their story straight, and other prosecutorial misconduct that had occurred in his case. So it wasn't until 2010 that we went before a federal judge, and when the judge, Owen, got up in the courtroom, that trial lasted for 4 days, and Owen admitted again in front of this judge that he had lied in court, and he did it to save his own life. And the prosecutor got up and admitted that he put witnesses together, and that sometimes that does happen when you're trying a case.
Wow.
The judge was furious, and so in 2012 he vacated my son's sentence.
Wow.
But unfortunately it didn't end there. They took him off death row and drove him back to Manassas and put him right back in the same courthouse that had put him there in the first place. And they have decided to try and retry him.
So tell me this, what is the concept or theory that he's being tried under, since Owen has admitted that he's the one that did the murder? Is he an accomplice? I mean,
they still call it murder for hire. They're saying
how did Owen murder Danny? Was it
shot him?
So how is your son connected to that? What is the prosecutor's theory to connect your son to that? I'm not asking you to tell me anything that's privileged that your son has said.
Okay.
I'm just asking you, what is the prosecutor's theory?
Well, Danny was a drug dealer. He
Okay.
dealt a lot of drugs in our area, and Owen bought drugs from Danny. And there were some phone calls made between my son and Owen. There's phone records, but no one knows what those phone calls were or what was said. Owen and Justin went to school together. They hung out together. Although he wasn't my favorite, one of my son's friends, when I asked my son, not to hang with him, he said, "Mom, nobody really likes this guy, but I don't want to be mean to him." And so I didn't stop them from hanging out. And so the prosecutor is calling it murder for hire. It was the only way really to
who
get
is the
it done.
person who's supposed to have done the murder for hire? Owen murdered Danny for hire.
Right.
Is that
They're
the
saying
part?
that my son hired Owen.
Oh, your son hired Owen, just based on telephone records, that no text messages, just an innuendo?
Well, and this is way back when telephone records, you got the timestamp when the phone call was made, but you don't know how long that phone call was or even if the phone call went through, because once the call was dialed, it showed up on your phone bill. If it went to voicemail or if it wasn't answered, you still couldn't, it always said a minute. Once the phone call was made, you still got the minute.
Right.
Right? So they were going out that night. It was my son's birthday. And
Oh,
so
wow.
they were getting ready to go celebrate my son's birthday. Justin was born on St. Patrick's Day, and this was March 15th. So they were going out a few days before to celebrate my son's birthday. And so the phone calls were made. We have no idea what they said. There was one kid who testified during the original trial that just when the phone rang again, and it was Owen, and my son didn't answer the phone, but said, "He is driving me crazy," because he kept calling. So there really wasn't much evidence here. And so the lawyer that took the case thought that he could save this young kid and build up his practice by keeping him from the death sentence. But he'd never tried a capital case before.
Your lawyer, your son's lawyer, had never tried a capital case? Oh, my God.
And the thing is, there's no brochure that you get when something like this happens in your life. My son had never been in trouble with the police. Owen had a long record of
How old was your son when he was charged?
19.
Oh, wow. And this was in Virginia? Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. Well, hopefully you'll get better representation the next time around.
We are so blessed. At this point, we have wonderful lawyers that have come on board. The Innocence Project still does what they can to help us. And we've got some very good lawyers, and we're just hoping for the best. But unfortunately, the lawyer that we've had for the past 3 years, since my son's case was vacated, she got moved up to the bench, which means we have a new lawyer that has to prepare.
Start all over.
Yes.
Oh, God, that is terrible. So, Owen had a new lawyer, which is strange, in a big death penalty case. Justin, I'm sorry. I had a question that kind of escaped me. So keep talking, keep telling me things. Maybe it'll come back
So
to me.
in 2012, they overturned his case, and they took him, he was to be released or retried. And
They usually, and if the feds say that, they usually say retry him in 180 days or 120 days. Y'all didn't have that kind of order?
we did. And so in December, when he still hadn't been released, the judge ordered him to be released by 5 o'clock on the 3rd of January. And so I had driven a minivan. I was just a regular mom who never thought about the death penalty, except I thought it was awful. But, I was a cheerleading coach and had 4 children and was very busy. And so, the death penalty wasn't anything that I ever thought about or talked about, but unfortunately now it's my life and my son's life. And so I've had to get involved and try and do what I can to make a difference with this horrible cross that we carry. But anyway, the van had long had to be retired, and all of my children wanted to be together when we picked him up from prison. We thought we were going to.
So y'all picked him up in January of 2013?
We were supposed to.
And what happened?
We got 45 minutes from the prison doors, and we were called to say, come to the lawyer's office instead, because they had issued a stay of that order and weren't going to release my son.
Oh, wow.
If you want to know the meaning of the words cruel and unusual punishment,
Oh, my God. I bet that was heartbreaking.
it was pretty hard.
How did y'all deal with it? Oh, my God.
1 minute at a time. Yeah, that's how we deal with everything. But we went to the lawyer's office and regrouped, and there had been people parked on the lawn ready to greet my son. And as hard as it was for us.
Now, which lawyer was that? That was the innocence lawyer, the one that's now on the bench?
This is the one that's now on the bench.
Okay.
And, as
I
hard
guess
as
that was a writ lawyer? Was that the lawyer that did the writ of habeas corpus?
she was doing the retrial.
The retrial.
Yeah.
Did
But the Innocence Project lawyer came up too. She
Okay.
she brought her children because they'd talked to him many times on the phone. They knew all about us, and they had come up to be part of his release, which didn't happen. But they, we knew that we could go home after that horrible car ride. And, when I thought about what it was for him to get that close to the door, only to have it slammed in his face again, it was heartbreaking.
So is he still in custody?
He is.
Oh, my
He's
God.
been in solitary confinement for about 14 years now.
Oh, my God. So what is your visitation ritual like?
Well, the funny thing is, when he was on death row, we had visits behind glass, and they were getting ready to bring video visits, Skype visits onto death row. And
Wow.
we only had 10 people on death row. So I went to the media, and I went to the head of the Department of Corrections, and I talked about how, this is kind of a ridiculous way to spend our tax dollars, and they decided not to do that. Well, now I'm in Manassas, and what do I get? video visits. I see him via Skype. I have to drive to Manassas and then see him on a TV screen.
And how far is that drive from you?
It's about 30 minutes, which isn't bad. The drive to death row was long and an all-day affair, but this is a little closer, but I only get to see him for 20 minutes. So I drive 30 minutes there, visit for 20 minutes, and drive home. And I see him every week. I believe that the best way to keep his mind sharp and make sure that he's okay is that he has a visit every week. So when I can't go, one of my nephews or my kids go.
What do you think? So you said you try to keep his mind sharp. How does he keep? I mean, how do you think he keeps his spirits up?
He's amazing. I don't know how he does it, but he was a bright light on death row. I had the other men used to write me letters and talk about how wonderful he was and what a good kid he was. And even the guards would say to me, he doesn't belong here. Keep fighting, Mama. And, you know, I understand that when they took him off death row, one of the guards actually sat in my son's cell and cried. So
they gotten so close to him. He's
right.
such a nice young man.
Right.
That's
and
just awful. Oh my God.
He's been, you know, he reads the newspaper, I'm sure cover to cover. He calls when he can, and we write him when we can and see him as often as we can. And I believe it's by the grace of God that he still has a good sense, you know, good head on his shoulders. And I think the way he does it and the way he's always been is that he stays concerned about others. And if he keeps his focus on us and what we need and the people around him and what they need, he doesn't think about the reality of what he's going through. And
That's a good way to be, too.
It works for him. It works for us.
Wow, wow, wow. Man, that's a heavy story. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned about the criminal justice system in dealing with this? Because I know you had no experience with it.
I had no experience with it. Except I had gone through divorce prior to Justin's arrest many years ago. But I realized how broken it was. I honestly thought, when he told me he was going to turn himself in, I was proud of him. I thought, wow, he's willing to, you know, admit to maybe doing some things he shouldn't have done in order to prove that he didn't do this murder. And I was proud of his honesty and his integrity. And it's broken. The system is so grossly flawed. It's run by human beings, and all of us make mistakes. And even that prosecutor who committed this horrible crime against my family, you know, I have to believe that he does his job. I'd like to believe that he does his job with good integrity. I think he's lost sight of that at this point because he's been doing this for 40 years, and he's put a lot of men on death row. But you know, I just like to think that he's still trying to keep integrity in the courthouse. I also learned a lot about forgiveness, and that's one thing that the Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing is all about. Our mantra is, you know, it's love and compassion for all humanity. I was raised Catholic. I believe that all life is sacred, and I believe that every life has deserved dignity and respect. And there's nothing about the death penalty that brings dignity and respect to another human being. I remember one time I asked Justin, you know, wasn't he mad at Owen for what he'd done to our family? And he said, I'm not mad at Owen. I don't have time to be mad at Owen. And I said, Justin, you are locked up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What do you mean you don't have time to be mad at Owen? And he said, you know, I feel sorry for him. And I realized then that I can sit in the corner and cry and be mad at Owen, or I can get up and brush it off and focus on doing positive things and forgive him. And I realized that forgiving Owen and forgiving those that have hurt me and my family, it sets a prisoner free, the prisoner being me and my family.
Right.
You know, I just look forward to the day when my son is the prisoner set free.
Right. Oh my God, that is so powerful, Terri. That is a powerful story and testimony. Hold your thoughts there, because I have some thoughts on it, but I want to try to give Bill Babbitt an opportunity to tell his story. Bill's going to tell the story of his brother.
Well, thank you for having us, Vivian. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here to Texas to talk about my dear brother. My brother Manny. The story begins in 1949 when my brother Manny was born. Without benefit of a doctor, I remember I was sitting under the tree in Cape Cod, Massachusetts in my house, and I remember my father rushing down, says, I got to go find Aunt Mary. I got to go find Aunt Mary. She's going to be the house. She's going to be the midwife for my brother's birth. And she never made it. Manny didn't wait, and My mother gave birth to her dear son, Manny, by her lonesome. Okay, Manny, I'm 7 years Manny's senior. Manny was a cute little kid. He came out with wavy hair, and my father's friends used to tease him and call him the milkman's baby. Okay? He always used to like to tag along with me. I want to be politically correct. I don't want to say we played cowboys and Indians. We played early 19th century European settlers and Native Americans. We played cowboys and Indians. We used to go clamming in the river, in the saltwater river that wound behind our house in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And we'd go into the woods and we'd build these little huts, and Manny liked to tag along with me. Okay, so I moved out here to California in 1967, July of 1967. At that point, they were still talking about an execution of a man by the name of Aaron Mitchell, who had shot to death a Sacramento police officer in 1967. This was in July of 1967 when I showed up in Sacramento. The execution of Aaron Mitchell had occurred some months earlier, but they were still talking about Aaron Mitchell's execution. And I thought, you know, Massachusetts didn't have the death penalty. I was born in Rhode Island. They didn't have the death penalty. And I'm thinking, well, all right, here I am in California now. They got the death penalty. They executed this man. And I thought, well, he killed a police officer. And if you need a police officer, someone is in your backyard, someone is in your house, he's going to destroy your family. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters?
No.
You know, who are you going to call? You're going to call the Sacramento Police Department. You're going to call the cops. So what happened when I came out to California? I was out here right about the time I left Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I was wondering about what Manny was doing. So I remember calling my mother on the telephone and saying, "Hey, Ma, how's Manny?" The Vietnam War was in its swing. It was going full blast. I says, "Ma, how's Manny?" She says, "Manny's in Vietnam. Manny's in a war." I couldn't believe it. It seems that Manny was watching the war unfold on TV. He decided he wanted to go into the Marine Corps. He had suffered a car accident when he was 12 years old. He was never the same after that. When Manny was 17 years old, he dropped out of the 7th grade. At 17 years old, he repeated his classes over and over again. He just couldn't get it right. I hate to say he was stuck on stupid, but he just could not function. So he went down to the Marine Corps to join the Marines. Tough, strapping young dude, okay? Handsome man. So the Marines were not about to let my brother get away. They needed people like Manny. So they gave him the answers to the test. And it was not long, my brother wore that proud uniform of the United States Marine Corps. He found himself in Vietnam during the siege of Khe Sanh, the bloodiest battle of the war. When you talk about Khe Sanh right now in these days, and when the Marines talk about their history, Khe Sanh is right up there with Guadalcanal and the Chosin Reservoir and all these hellacious battles they were in. Manny found himself at war.
Talk about the body count at the siege.
Oh, let me tell you, the body count, they had over 700 Marines died at Khe Sanh. They had over 2,000 Marines were wounded at Khe Sanh. Manny used to have this instrument of death they called an ontos, which was a tracked vehicle with 6 106 rifles mounted on both sides. And when they used to take these shells, put shells into these 106 recoilless rifles, they load them up with shrapnel. They load them up with to take out bunkers, machine gun nests. They also loaded them up to take out human beings. And Manny said you could fire one at a time. You could fire all 6. And he says, and when we used to fire these, he says, Brother Billy, when we fired this ontos, these shells, at the enemy soldiers, he said the sky looked like red rags flying. My brother seen some hellacious things. My brother was wounded on the airstrip at Khe Sanh during a bombardment, and he was mistaken for dead. He was picked up from the battlefield, loaded on a helicopter on a pile of dead Marines and dismembered body parts. Manny came to. He had suffered a head wound, but he came to. He went back to the battlefield. He had amnesia on the battlefield. He saved a man's life on the battlefield. This man later came to testify at Manny's clemency. Retired police detective from Detroit, Michigan. Manny saw things, and he used to talk about the war. He talked about the rats pulling on entrails. He talked about the love of the fellow Marines that he had for the fellow Marines. He talked about America slaughtering these Vietnamese people. He had empathy for these people, and he did not want to kill anybody. He did not want to kill anybody. All right, so I lost track of Manny. Manny served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. He fought in 5 major campaigns. Remember now, I said he was wounded in 1980. He fought in 5 major campaigns. So here I am in Sacramento. I'm wondering what's happening to my brother. I lost track of my brother. It wasn't until about 1976, I went back east, and Manny was in a mental hospital back in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. During the time that he lived in Rhode Island, after coming out of the Marine Corps, he was startled in his house by an automobile, apparently something happened. And Manny picks up his little 18-month-old son, and he picks up his son when he hears this battle. Manny's back at war. He's fighting another battle. The bombs are coming, the bombs are coming. We gotta save the baby, we gotta save the baby. He snatches up the baby and he runs with the baby. And when he left to go back on duty at the Marine Corps, that next day, when he came home, his wife was gone and took the baby. He lost 2 wives like that. 2 tours of duty in Vietnam.
And that's what people used to call shell-shocked, right?
Yeah, they call it post-traumatic stress disorder.
Back then they called it shell-shock. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, so a lot of people came back there when I was a kid.
Tell it to these kids right now, these young people right now.
You know, San Antonio has 5 military bases, so everybody was either married to people from the military or, they all came back. And one of the things I will want to comment on later about what I observed as a kid, born in the 50s, when these young men came back. But I'll tell you about that later.
I'm
so tell me let's get to how your brother got on death row.
Okay, one day, when Manny finally came to live with us in Sacramento, my wife and the 3 children, we didn't realize he was in such bad shape. He had served his time at the mental hospital in Massachusetts for 3 years, but they had to release him because he served his time. So here comes Manny. He's coming back. He's coming to Sacramento to live with us. I was so proud to have Manny to live with us. I noticed that there was something strange about Manny, Vivian, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. He was always talking about the war. He couldn't sleep at night. He was restless. Sometimes he'd break down and cry for who knows what reason. I knew something was wrong with Manny. And then one day, the news story came out about the dear grandmother who had perished at the hands of an intruder, went into the house. And it was close by to where I lived. The lady, the dear grandmother, her name was Leah Shandell. She had something in common with my mother. They were both 78 years old. And I thought, gee, that could have been my mother, because my mother was living alone. She chose to live alone. And when I realized that was so close by, one day I went to work, and I got a phone call from my wife. I was at the railroad. I got a phone call from Linda. She says, have you given Manny any money? I go, no. I said, Manny's got some coins. He's going around stopping the ice cream truck and giving the kids ice cream and stuff like that. What's going on? So I started worrying. I was alarmed. Where's Manny getting money, I came home from railroad that night. Waiting for Manny to show up. I was going to question Manny. He never showed up. I went into the closet, and I think, let me go inside the closet and do some snooping around, and maybe I could find some evidence that he's doing some burglaries or something's going on. And I had moved aside this old leather coat that my wife had, and I heard this thump on the floor. This thing dropped on the floor. So when I reached down and looked, there was this cigarette lighter. And the cigarette lighter had this monogram on it, LS. I didn't put Leah Shandell, I didn't put 2 and 2 together at that point. It hit me later on while I was shaving. And I remember when I thinking, men do their best when they're shaving, okay? And I thought, okay, What's LS mean? And then it came to me. I was totally shocked.
Now, how did it come to you? You'd seen it on the news? You'd
I,
heard her
I
name
read
on
it.
the
I
news?
read it in the newspaper.
Okay.
I went over to where the newspaper was at, and I pulled the newspaper out, and I read the newspaper, and that's when I got Leah Shandell, LS. So agonized. I was shocked. My life changed at that point. I went up to my wife was laying in bed asleep. I dropped down to my knees. I prayed, Lord, take me away from this terrible nightmare. But it wasn't to be. And my wife woke up. We discussed it. We decided to go to the Sacramento Police Department and call them and tell them that, hey, I know about Leah Shandell. I think I know who did it. I says, my brother was at war, but let me tell you about the war that he's fighting in his head from his post-traumatic stress disorder. So the cops came. We picked up Manny. I was able to go take him to where Manny was at because I was afraid he was going to shoot Manny. They promised they wasn't going to shoot Manny. But I wanted the police to be safe, and I didn't want another dear grandmother to perish. And I was not about to give my brother a bus ticket and send him back to Boston, Massachusetts.
Where your mother was, right.
Or for that matter, send him to Houston, Texas,
Anywhere.
where some other grandmother would perish at his hands. And the police promised me that Manny would not get the death penalty, and I believed the police.
How old was your brother at the time?
My brother was 32 years old, and I'm 7 years his senior. But it was not to be. It was not to be. When the district attorney got a hold of it, they decided to go with the special circumstances. At that time, they had 8 special circumstances in California called the Dirty 8. Now they got about 20. And they explained to me what was going on with the death penalty. Manny
Because it was just coming back.
Yeah, it was being. That's right. It was being coming back. And the ironic thing
70s.
about it is
Well, it came back in the 70s, so it had already been back, but it wasn't being used very much.
No, it came
So this
back
is
in
the
1977, I think.
And what year was this?
Well, Manny got arrested in 1980.
Okay.
See, but the death penalty had come back, and
Right.
so when people were voting for the death penalty, they were voting for the enhancement of the death penalty, more special circumstances. I voted each time for the death penalty until it came
Knocking at your door.
knocking on my door. Now it's my brother. It's not her son. It's not your sister. It's my brother now. And boy, did I get an education. And they betrayed. The cops did not lie to me because they really believed that Manny would not get the death penalty because they knew. But when the politicians got a hold of it, that was a different story.
And that's, I think, where Terri is saying where the human aspect comes in. We're human and we're flawed. What's interesting to me is the Constitution seems good and very intuitive and very intelligent when you read it, you know? It seems like, I mean, even though blacks weren't even full people in the Constitution, we adopted now because we're an amendment, but it was written good. You know what I mean? I'm just the way it was written, you know, cruel, unusual punishment,
Right.
Search of your homes, you know, no search and seizure. I mean, but when you adopt just the basic Constitution, it still applies. But yet, isn't it amazing what we as humans have interpreted it? I mean, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, it really sounds like we're a militia. You know, like the Europeans that were here, you want to be able to everybody to pick up a gun, you know, because their mama, Great Britain, had to come across the water so they could shoot at them. They're all their own militia without having an organized army. That's what it seems like it's for, but we've changed it to something else.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's just interesting how we have, as humans, as flawed, taken cruel and unusual punishment, and it seemed to be written on its face. Our government wasn't going to kill people.
Right.
And then our government killed people. And then our government stopped killing people. And now our government is killing people again. And now we have the big push to stop killing people. It's cruel and unusual punishment, not only to the person on death row, but as you said, the families of both lives. Because I think that's one of the things we want to talk about, is that everybody's lives matter. Right. Everybody's lives are affected.
Right.
I think we all understand that sometimes people need to be removed from society because they're dangerous.
And we have the means to do that.
And
Our
we have the
prisons
means
are
to do
quite
that.
capable of keeping people safe and holding them accountable for the wrong things that they do.
But the human aspect, especially over the last, let me just say this, over the last 25 years, when you read cases, it seemed like we were good up until about 1980, 85. Stare decisis, which is the law building on the law, building on the law until it made sense. But then after that, it stopped making sense. If you start reading cases like 85 and on up, it no longer makes sense the ends justify the mean. It's all political. It's always get the crooks, get the crooks, get the crooks. When politicians really deal with our money and our budget, I mean, it's all about the money. It's not really about, it's all these billions of dollars that they get to deal, trillions of dollars they get to play with. It's not even about the criminal justice system, but they make it that so that they can oversimplify it. And I appreciate an organization like yours because we need to let people know we have, why should anybody be on death row for somebody else to kill somebody? I mean, that should never be a special circumstance, Terry, in your son's case. I mean, if he's not the actual killer,
and there's no doubt.
There's no doubt that he's not the killer, then how can you take some phone records that don't even show? I'd be different if it was text messages, go kill him now or something like that. But someone else gets to write the script about what your son was thinking and doing that he doesn't even know, and the government is Goliath. They have all the money and all the means to create this, and people come. What's scary is this. I remember being a prosecutor, and I have such a sense of right and wrong and justice, and I went to do the right thing, and I always tried to do the right thing, even though the pressure sometimes was to do the wrong thing. I was grown, and I did the right thing. But I remember one time after a trial, just a little DWI trial, with the 8 jurors afterwards telling me, or maybe it wasn't DWI, but jurors afterwards telling me, I'm glad you're on our side. And it made my stomach hurt. Now, I'm a prosecutor. I should be happy they said that, right? But you know why it bothered me? Because it bothered my sense of fairness, because you shouldn't be on anybody's side. Right. And that's when I realized people come to convict. You know, all that song and dance, we say guilty until proven innocent, it's just old words written on old paper. But people are guilty until proven innocent.
They should have been on my side. They should have celebrated me for
turning your brother.
For turning in my brother.
I have a murder like that right now where a mother has turned her son in, and she's having to lie to her son and say she didn't, but she did because she believed he did something. She didn't know the whole story, and it was a cold case. But I mean, families, it should be celebrated. There should not have been a situation like yours, Terry. There should not be a situation like yours, Bill. If you turn your brother in and that police officer, being an arm of the government, said that he would not get the death penalty, the DAs should have honored that. Right. Because they're all the government and they all work together. And that should have been an agreement that had to be honored.
I wonder how many people out here in this town right here, grandmothers or aunties or cousins, they know who committed that murder down the street, but they're reluctant to come forward because they know Texas and its death penalty. Look, I'm for law and order. I'm for doing the right thing. I see in this day and age where we got so many terrible things happening. We have white police officers killing young kids. We have young black kids killing these white people and so forth. It goes all the way around. Where does it stop? They should take people, like, for instance, I stepped forward. I should have got something out of the deal instead of they put me back in limbo land right now. I got members of my family don't even want to talk to me because they look at me.
You turned them in like you're the bad guy.
Young people look at me like I'm a snitch. I have Manny's blood on my hands. I have a lot of guilt. And if one for people like the Journey of Hope, when I first started in this, they wasn't talking too much about families of the executed. It wasn't too much about families of the executed. And I started pushing these people, Murder Victims Families Reconciliation, Murder Victims Families for Human Rights. I was on the board of these groups. I said, when are you going to start talking about families like mine, like families like Terry's? It wasn't there. And then one day they decided they're going to start talking about families of the executed. They says, Bill Babbitt, you can get on the bus. You can get on this bus, but you're not going to be a second-class victim. You can only have to sit in the back of the bus. You can get right up front here because Bill Pelkey tells me this. Bill Pelkey lost his dear grandmother. And he tells me, your brother Manny was just as precious in God's eyes as my dear grandmother. And that's a story you need to talk about, is Bill Pelkey's story. So he set a good example. He helps people like Terry and I and others, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, and in Texas, you've got that law of parties, which is a very dangerous law as well.
Right. It's very dangerous, and it's similar. I mean, we have actually murder for hire as one of the ways that you can commit it, but also we have the law of parties, and that's what I have. I have a capital murder right now. I do appointed capital murders, and in Harris County, being such a large county, our judges decided, 20 years ago, that to do it, maybe 15 years ago, to be a death penalty qualified lawyer, you had to take a test, and I'm board certified in criminal law. I wasn't when I took the test, but the people who do capital murders in Harris County are the best criminal defense lawyers. Yeah. Now, we don't always have the resources
No.
And I don't know why we don't get them up front. The government can spend $100,000 on an expert, but we're being told, 3,000, 4,000. That we get limits. How can you limit an expert? But when the government is going to spend millions housing and killing. So, but I've tried to fight for mine, and I have one right now that I was appointed to this summer. That the probable cause is that the guys went in to rob this drug dealer, and the drug dealer ended up dead by the hands of one of the men. My guy's not accused of being the person who did it, but it's under the law of parties.
Right.
And it's harder, I think, to me with this case. I haven't really investigated it yet. I haven't gotten into it other than just getting to know my client. Is that when people go into a place to rob with guns or knives, that's one thing. But this is one where there were no weapons. And so if one person has a fight with somebody and the guy hits his head and dies, I don't even understand how that could be the law of parties. But people are so prejudiced against the word gang. So what the prosecutors like to do is they say everybody's in a gang.
Right.
If you have a tattoo, you're in a gang.
Make them ugly.
Because, conservatives are scared of gangs. I have white friends, girlfriends who I love. I remember being in Europe one time, and we passed some guys getting on a train. They were all dressed cute, going somewhere, and they said, "Look at that gang." And to me, they just looked like black kids with cute outfits on. Mm-hmm. It was nothing gang-related looking like that to me. They just looked like kids with outfits. But I'm just telling you, that's how prejudiced. I was with some white female girlfriends. That's how prejudiced we are against people. And so that it's hard to beat that as a criminal defense lawyer, because we are so, and you know why? Because for the 25 years we haven't had balanced media.
Right.
Media is now, the news is a profit center. And so it's not like, Ed Bradley or, Walter Cronkite, when they tried to tell both sides and they didn't get commercials based on money. Right. They told both sides. Now we don't tell both sides. We just say one side, so everybody's a criminal.
Well, one thing that worries me about this murder for hire or this law of parties thing is you're basically telling. I remember thinking when Justin first was accused of murder for hire, I thought, you're telling kids, you're telling people out there, you can go out and do whatever you want as long as you have somebody else to blame it on.
Right.
And I just think that's a dangerous thing for kids to grow up with.
And let me tell you what's so crazy. In Texas, we have something called the accomplice rule. So in your son and justice situation, they would have to have, you can have Owen testify against Justin, but there has to be, you can't be convicted just on the testimony of an accomplice. You have to have some extra evidence that tends to connect, but that can be any damn thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that our legislators contemplated that when they created it. So in Justin's case, it would just be those cell phone records.
Right.
They say nothing.
Right. They say nothing. And
see, this is what jurors think. This is what's scary. The government wouldn't be spending all this money to prosecute Justin if he wasn't guilty. And so they come in there thinking he must be guilty, and they don't think that it could be one cop's ego or one or two prosecutors' egos, because everybody that's on a jury has a job, and every job has accountability. But what the people of the system don't understand is that's one of the jobs that's not accountable, because you're just accountable to voters every 4 years. And as long as you say, I'm a Republican in Texas, or I'm conservative and I'm tough on crime, you're going to get elected. So you don't know anything about that person. And so the boss are the voters who don't vote.
Right.
Well, it took $330 million to execute each of the 13 people executed in California. I don't know what it costs in Virginia to execute people, or in Texas, but it cost $330 million to execute my brother Manny Babbitt. What could they? I would have promoted. Look, send the dear grandchildren to school, to education, pay for the houses of the widows left behind.
Let him be in prison with mental health for the rest of his life. I'm just saying he needed to be institutionalized for the rest of his life. But like you said, that wouldn't have cost that much money in terms of all of the appeals and the lawyers and the this and the that. I mean, and the problem is, obviously, we need to take the politics out of the judiciary.
Yes.
I mean, I was in France once, and I'm not really into history, but I remember thinking that everybody was looking at, I think in France, to become a judge, you have to take a test. I mean, we wouldn't have most of the judges we had if they had to take a test, because once they become lawyers, they don't want to take tests anymore. And they had to take a test to make sure that the law was building on the old law, like stare decisis. So it's only the most intelligent lawyers who are even eligible to become a judge. I mean, like, why don't we have a system like that? Because our judges don't even have to read books anymore. All they have to do is just vote for the prosecution, And with it being a run-party system for so long, all the prosecutors are married to each other. They're all together. I mean, so how can you grade your girlfriend or your wife's papers when you're on the Court of Appeals? You can't do that. Right. They won't do it. So the only little bit you have is federal system because you're appointed for life. That's the only little action we have when we're being wronged is the federal system. Yes, sir, Mr.
I want to say this. I don't want to miss this opportunity to tell you that along with the Journey of Hope, we have people from different issues of the death penalty. But we have a gentleman here by the name of Mpagi Edmary from Uganda. And we have Ronald Katongle Ronald. Mpagi Edward is just celebrated his 60th birthday yesterday. Well, he was on death row in Uganda for a murder that was never ever committed. Okay. The opposing family member, they wanted his land. They wanted to hurt Edward, and so what they did, they said, okay, I'm going to tell people I got murdered. I'm going to pay the cops to go ahead and arrest Edward, take his property and everything. So Edward goes to Luzira prison in Uganda, where we went and visited Uganda, and guess what? Edward spent 18 years, and the only thing that saved him from not getting executed in Uganda, and Edward tells me about 60%, that's 60% of the people in Uganda are innocent. The only thing that saved Edward is that he taught Bible study and he taught English, so that was a benefit to the authorities in Uganda. And Edward got on his knees one day and prayed to God to release him. He says, I'm going to go back to my village. He says, I'm going to make a home, an orphanage for these kids that are left behind by AIDS and imprisonment. And so Dream One World, Bill Pelkey got us over to Uganda. I told Edward, and I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to hush, okay? I'm going to tell you this.
Okay, because we have 10 minutes.
You know what I told Edward? Okay, I told Edward, look it, America lives on a big glass house on a hill. And when I was a kid, I learned that you do not throw stones if you live in glass houses. We're a big glass house. We have no business telling anything about human rights when we do this, when we take these lives. We separate mothers from their sons. We kill brothers who turn in their brothers. We live on a big glass house. We got no business rolling stones down at that little glass house on the bottom of the hill.
What's interesting is Uganda, Edward tells us that Uganda looks to America because they believe that America does better. And because America has a death penalty system, the Ugandans are having a hard time saying that we can get rid of the death penalty because they think America knows what they're doing. So we just need to get rid of it. If we're doing it behind closed doors, we're arguing over what kind of drugs we can use. And when you stop and think about what we're doing and how much time we're spending discussing how we can kill people, let's just take a step back, And
I always have these arguments, philosophical arguments with my pro-life friends who are the first ones that kill people on death row. I mean, it's like, well, at least they had a chance. Well, no, some people don't have a chance. Some mothers know that they need to abort their babies because they can't afford it or whatever the reason is, and that's their personal business and decision. But everybody knows this life is here. Okay, so why can't we treat it like it's precious? But, well, they had a choice and they screwed it up. Oh, okay, so then you decide. Then you become God now and decide. It's amazing the tricks that we play. And let me just make one comment about Vietnam. This is what I wanted to say about when I was a young girl. It looked like, from my vantage point as a 10 and 15-year-old girl when these boys came back or young men came back, that they gave them a bunch of drugs. They were all on heroin, Quaaludes, Christmas trees, because they used to give them to us. And so it's like the government allowed these 18-year-olds that they took into Vietnam and they gave them a bunch of drugs. I mean, they were all on dope. And when they came back from Vietnam, coming through San Antonio, Fort Sam, Randolph, Lackland, Kelly Air Force, Brooksville, they were all on dope. All of them. And San Antonio is only 5% black, so my older cousins and everybody dated those guys, and they were all on dope. They were shell-shocked, on dope, and getting them in the barracks and giving them to us. Yeah. So I'm just telling you that if you didn't go to Vietnam, Vietnam was full of drugs. And so not only are these kids, these kids see these horrific murders that they didn't understand. Because when you're 18, 19, and 20, you don't understand politics. You don't understand politics too. Politics affects you when you're in your 30s. But they gave them dope on top of that. So, and then they treated them like dogs. I mean, we should never murder a Marine.
Thank you very much.
We should never murder a Marine.
Yeah, we should never murder anybody.
Some of my most difficult cases have been when I've represented someone that's a Vietnam vet, because the society just like, they're just like, because they're crazy. A lot of them, they're crazy. I mean, like you said, they have shell-shocked or now what's called post-traumatic stress disorder or Agent Orange.
We
Well,
need to
and we
save
do
these
talk-
children coming. Excuse me, Terry. We need to save these young people. I want to say this: these young men and women who come in from the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, committing suicide at the rate of 22 a day.
I feel so bad
We
for
need to
them.
do something
I
about
feel so
that.
bad for them, and it's going to be worse in Vietnam, because at least in Vietnam, the rich kids had to try not to go. When this is a voluntary army and you don't even draft the kids, are these ones who just went to Wall Street or went to college and didn't even have to deal with it? Are they going to take care of these kids who are maimed coming back from this last 14 years of war? You know, if there was a draft, there wouldn't have even been 14 years of a war. But anyway, Terry, let me let you.
No, it's just the one thing that we do always hold close in our heart are the victims' families. And I do think about, you know, what's going to happen with my son's case in the victim's family. We're going to trial again. And now they have to relive this nightmare. And the money that we're spending trying to rub salt in the wounds for these families. I feel bad for these victims' families who are told that when the executions take place, they're going to feel better. Well, if they're feeling better because another life is lost, then we've done them an injustice and not helped them heal. You know, when something happens to you, you know, when there's a crime committed, you're going to have a hole in your heart. But you can either fill it with love and compassion, or you can fill it with hatred. And I guarantee you that by letting it go and filling it with love and compassion, it takes a heavy weight off your shoulders, and it does make life a little bit better to endure. You'll never forget the loss of your loved one.
Never.
But you can heal much easier if you're not full of hate. And that's, I mean,
And that's just such a basic Christian principle or hierarchy principle. I mean, the more you hate people, the more torn up you are.
Right.
And the
And look
more
at
you
how bad
love and
society's
forgive
gotten.
and do something for someone else. I mean, what you said was so beautiful about your son in prison. He helps others. Because I know when I'm at my lowest, I try to go do something for somebody else, because I was mistreated as a kid. So it makes me feel better. But if you just sit there and sulk, I mean, it'll eat you up inside when someone wrongs you. It's hard. I mean, when someone wrongs you, when you're hurt, you know, there is a process you have to go through to heal.
Exactly.
But, you know, you do have to try to fill that wound with love and compassion, with something besides hate, because that's not. But some people, it's amazing, really are motivated by hate.
I know.
There's a lot of people in this world now motivated by hate and selfishness.
And it's made a difference in the way our children are being raised.
Yes.
You know, we're telling people to kill people because killing is wrong. Well, we don't rape rapists and we don't burn down the houses of arsonists. So why are we killing people for killing people? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
And our kids have lost their values. I mean, they're killing each other. They're killing, you know, the kid that used to want to commit suicide will now go take everybody out with them before they commit suicide. You know, it's crazy. Well, you know, it's almost over, but we have a phone call. So turn your volume down, caller, and please state your comment. We have about 5 minutes.
Mrs. King, I think you do a wonderful public service for the people of this country. And I would like to say that there is a website. I don't know if anybody's heard. I don't know if your guests have heard of the Innocence Project, but it's innocenceproject.org, and you can go online there and read the different stories of people who have been falsely convicted. And some of these people have spent 25, 30 years in prison for something they did not do. And it just angers me to read stuff like this.
We travel with many men who have spent years on death row and who share their stories about wrongful conviction and exoneration. And when I look at them and think, if the state of California had gotten their way, we would not have our dear friend Suja and so many others just like him. And it happens all too often. I thought we were unique when I walked through the doors of that prison system, and I realized how many people are in there. We are fortunate. We're one of the few fortunate ones because we have great attorneys on board helping us, and some people can't get one. So yes, the Innocence Project is a wonderful, wonderful organization. If it weren't for them, my son would not be here today. He would be dead.
Thank you for calling, and thank you for watching and your support.
See?
So, yeah, well, we have 3 minutes, so let's let the kids say a little something, okay? So, Amy, tell me a little bit quickly why you helped start this organization and what you're learning as a young woman.
Sure. Well, this actually sparked interest after taking Professor Odero's death penalty seminar. And in her seminar, we learned about the many issues that face the death penalty. And there's issues in regards to race, mental illness, financial ability, things as recent as botched executions and junk science and stuff like that. So as a matter of fact, a couple of months after we finished the seminar, they actually scheduled to execute somebody that we had learned about in class, Scott Panetti, who had severe mental illness. So it was just something that I thought that needed to be talked about, and so the founding members just, we got a death penalty interest group together, and we received an overwhelming number of students that were interested in just having a conversation. So the interesting thing about our group is we actually welcome people who are for and against the death penalty, because we think it's just an important topic to talk about, and we just encourage everybody to get educated. And as recent as yesterday's program that we saw, we had a number of students come in and they were just amazed at the stories that were out there. They had never heard the other side talk, and they were affected by it.
And it's so important because you're our future legislators and judges, and so we need you to have an understanding of all topics and all sides, and really give more life to the Constitution, cruel and unusual punishment, families, and the way we spend our dollars.
Exactly.
As Mr. Babbitt said, wouldn't it be better, Mr. Babbitt said, wouldn't it be better if we spent all those $300 million on the families and not on the appeal process to lawyers, when we know the end's going to justify the means? They just want to kill your brother. They didn't care. I mean, his life didn't matter because of the guilt of Vietnam, I guess. I don't know why we're like that, but let me give you 1 minute.
Well, that's a unique thing about the Death Penalty Awareness Society. Like Amy mentioned, we're not for or against the death penalty, but we believe that through outreach and education, we can help people make an informed decision. And if it wasn't for people like Anna Otero and their death penalty seminar, a lot of these issues would remain skirted under the rug. But like you said, a lot of us are future people who can improve the system. And thankfully, we have people like Anna Otero and organizations like the Journey of Hope that can help us better understand both sides of the argument and do the best for our country.
And if you want to try to say something right quick until he throws us off the air, let's keep talking. Go ahead, Terri.
I just think that it's wonderful to see that these young people are bringing this issue to light, because I think education and communication is what's going to stop this death penalty, what's going to stop this cycle of violence. My heart goes out to the families, both of the family of the executed this evening as well as the victim's family, and I just hope that both families can somehow find some healing.
Mr. Babbitt?
Well, I'd like to say that people might look at it and say, well, what if it was your brother or your sister? Well, my cousin Butchie, he died as a result of being struck by the fist, and he died. He's dead. He was a Vietnam veteran. But the person who struck my cousin Butchie and caused the demise of my cousin Butchie got less than a year in prison, a year in jail in Sacramento by the same district attorney that prosecuted his case, the same district attorney that demanded that my brother die after he exhausted his appeals.
And that's what's so awful.
My brother
about our
became
system.
a monster, and the other kid became a quintessential ex-Boy Scout.
Because it's the victim. It's
Yes.
the victim. Your brother was a 78-year-old woman, and then the other guy was just another black kid,
Yes,
dying.
ma'am.
So that's the whole conversation about Black Lives Matter that we wish our white brethren understood. We know that white lives matter. We respect that.
Of course.
We just want to tell you that our lives matter too. That's all that's about. And I hate it when it's twisted around like that, because we think everybody's life matters, but we're
Everybody's
just trying to
life.
bring a voice.
Right.
Ma'am?
Everybody's life matters.
Everybody's life matters, and it hurts me when the young kids are they're trying to get some pride and feel like they're part of society. And I just hope you tell your white friends that that's what they mean when they say Black Lives Matter. We know your life matters. We're not taking that away from you. We recognize that, but we want all lives to matter. And we're saying black so people are not afraid to say it.
Right. It shouldn't be a competition.
It shouldn't be a competition. It should be where we're together as a society. Well, I'm glad we're able to have these conversations. I'm glad we're able to put them on YouTube. We're able to keep the conversation alive because our legislators are spending our tax dollars. We should say where our tax dollars go. These young people are our future. They can't sit with blinders because we have voluntary wars now where everybody doesn't have to get drafted. They still have to take care of the mess that their parents make, okay? And hopefully make it a better world to live in. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I hope we've educated you on issues concerning the death penalty. Good night. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something